Well, first off, thank you all for inviting me again. My name is Stacy Chen. I'm running for the Texas House of Representatives in District 66. A little bit about myself. I was born in Arizona. I grew up in Denton, Texas. So Texas is my home, even though I wasn't born here. My parents actually, on the weekends, whenever I was growing up, would bring my siblings and I to the Plano, Richardson, Dallas area. So even though I grew up in Denton, Collin County is very much my home. There's a few reasons that I'm getting involved in politics and that I have decided to run for office. One of them is really talking with a lot of grassroots activists, both in Collin County as well as in Dallas and Denton County. And a lot of us feel that we need a different type of representation in office. A lot of us feel that there have been a lot of career politicians who have been in office a little too long, that they've become very out of touch with the American people, and so we really want to change that. And another reason that I, am wanting to get involved and to really step up is to motivate the younger generation. A lot of us are very disillusioned with politics, and a lot of it is because of people that are career politicians who have been in office for a long time and we feel are very dishonest with us, and so we don't like that, obviously. I don't think anybody likes being lied to. And so, part of it is just stepping up and saying, my generation, we really need to get involved. We really need to start becoming active in local, state, and national politics because it's our future, and we really need to take a stand in what we believe in and really fight for it. Otherwise, whenever we get older, it might be too late. So that's a little bit about myself as well as, why I'm deciding to run.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right. The first question that we have is on fiscal responsibility, and it has to do with the Economic Stabilization Fund, also known as the Rainy Day Fund. In 1988, Texas voters approved the creation of the Economic Stabilization Fund, or commonly known as the Rainy Day Fund. The first question is, what was the original purpose of the Economic Stabilization Fund? And you have 1 minute for this response.
Sure. The Rainy Day Fund is really for state emergencies, and I think that we need to make sure that the funds that get put into that are used properly and only used whenever we actually have state emergencies. I know in this last session it was actually rated for various purposes, and I don't think that's proper because we do have specific funding for things like water, transportation, education, and we have enough to be allocated and to be used properly. The problem is when it's not, then you start rating other funds to try to divert and channel money to somewhere else where it wasn't originally allocated, and I think that becomes very problematic.
Okay, thank you.
When is it acceptable to withdraw funds from the Economic Stabilization Fund?
And she has 1 minute.
And you have 1 minute
Sure.
to answer.
I think whenever, we do have large national or state emergencies that, require us to take funds from there. And I don't know if, I know it's not supposed to be follow-up questions, but I'm actually not certain if you were wanting me to give a specific example of it or if, okay. I think if we had, some very large natural disaster in Texas, or for instance, and we didn't have any type of assistance from anywhere else, I think that would be a proper example of when we would be able to use funds from there.
Okay. Does the Economic Stabilization Fund need to be preserved or abolished, and why? 1 minute.
I think it can be preserved because, should any type of emergency occur where we actually need those funds, I think it's smart to have it there. It's just the idea of, in any case where individuals have money saved up for any type of emergency, I think that's actually very responsible versus, just spending all of the money that you do earn or accrue. And, should an emergency occur, you suddenly have no backup. So I actually think it's a good idea to keep it.
Okay.
Next, on the same fiscal responsibility, November 2013, Texas voters approved raiding the Economic Stabilization Fund by $2 billion to fund water development. This coming November 2014, voters will be asked to amend the Texas Constitution again and approve withdrawing more money from the Economic Stabilization Fund, but for transportation purposes this time. Is this a proper use of the Economic Stabilization Fund? You have 1 minute.
Sure. The easy answer to that is no. Like I was stating before, with our Texas budget, we have enough to spend for things like water, transportation, education. The problem is, is the money that's actually being allocated for those purposes being spent on those purposes? And the answer right now is no, right? They're too busy, rechanneling money to go elsewhere, or saying that they're going to spend a specific amount for the specific purpose, but it's not actually going completely there. And so I think that's improper. It's an improper use of the rainy day fund for transportation, because we have enough for that aspect.
This next question is on fiscal responsibility also. Article 8 of the Texas Constitution deals with taxation and revenue. Article 8, Section 1A states, quote, taxation shall be equal and uniform. When is it appropriate for the state to grant or mandate tax exemptions or tax incentives to one private corporation or one group of property owners and not another private property or private corporation or individual? And you have 2 minutes.
I don't think that's ever proper to say that one group over another should have specific rights or specific exemptions. I think, that's actually the government picking, who they want to side with, basically picking winners and losers. We're going to support this group because, you support us, or for some reason. And so I don't think that's a proper role of government. That's basically saying, one group over another is more important, and that's not, I don't think that's, proper for government to choose that. I think the proper role of government is actually to protect every single individual, every single American citizen's right to life, liberty, and property, and the pursuit of happiness. And so you can't pick one group over another whenever it comes to the proper role of government. And so by doing that, they're out of their jurisdiction.
Thank you.
And going back to the water issue and the rainy day fund, what would be your solution to the water problem in Texas? You have 1 minute to answer.
So the water problem, obviously, being in Texas, we don't have very many natural sources. A lot of ours are man-made resources for that. And it was interesting because I was having a conversation with somebody else, along with some other friends of mine. And one of the options that came to mind was the idea of dredging, actually, to not only increase revenue for the state, but also to make sure that the reservoirs that we had were actually being utilized to their maximum purpose. And so the problem is a lot of the lakes that we have, as the soil continues to go down into it. I don't know, obviously, the proper geographical or geological terms for this, but the deposits start creating and filling up at the bottom, and so it's actually decreasing the amount of water that they can hold. And so we actually can maximize our use of them by removing those deposits at the bottom, which are very high in nutrients, and actually selling them and using that, and then actually allowing the lakes to hold more water as well.
Okay, thank you. All right, this one is on state sovereignty. In the 83rd legislative session, Representative Giovanni Capriglione introduced legislation that would bring 6,643 bars of Texas gold from the state of New York to the state of Texas. Would you support bringing Texas gold back to the state of Texas? Why or why not? And you have 2 minutes.
The answer is yes. It's easy. It's ours. Why is it elsewhere? We have the proper facilities to hold and to store it and to protect it. So I don't know why it's in somebody else's holding. I believe that we should bring it back, and I would definitely support something like that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, this is also on state sovereignty. The 10th Amendment reads, "The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people." First question, what is the purpose of the 10th Amendment and whose rightful duty is it to enforce the Bill of Rights? And you have 2 minutes.
Okay. So the purpose of the 10th Amendment is basically saying that anything that's not enumerated in the Constitution for the federal government to preside over is left up to the states to decide, and each state should be able to decide that with the people and the residents and the citizens who are of that state. And so, it's very important that as each state we realize, we have the power to nullify laws that the federal government is passing that they don't have the power to do. And I think a lot of people don't realize that because the federal government has for a long time been usurping power from the states, and they've been taking over. And it's almost become very natural and very, it's just standard that we don't realize that that's actually not their proper role and that they shouldn't be doing things like that. And so I think at the state level what we need to do is we need to realize that we can stand up against them. We can say, that's actually not something, that's not a power that you're allowed to enforce upon the states. And so we actually need people at the state level who realize that and who will stand up against the government and say, or stand up against the federal government and say, you don't have the jurisdiction to come into our state and tell us what we can or cannot do in these regards. And we basically need to nullify a lot of those laws that they're enforcing at the state level.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
This also has to do with state sovereignty. Please list 3 individual rights that you are willing to address and fight for in the 84th Texas Legislature by authoring or co-authoring a bill to effectively push back against federal overreach. You have 2 minutes to answer.
The first right that I believe we have and that I would, very strongly support is our Second Amendment rights. Basically, I think everybody has the right to protect their life, their property, and what best than the Second Amendment. So that's definitely one of the rights that I would happily support and to address. Let me think of 2 more. The second one I would have to say would be our Fourth Amendment right to be safe and secure in our persons and our homes. I think it's very problematic when we have something like the TSA who are basically treating everybody as criminals as you're going through the line to go through and to get onto the airplanes. Basically they're saying everybody is suspicious, so we have to search everybody, all of your belongings, all of your person, basically going through those types of body scanners and saying, we don't trust you as an American citizen. So I definitely want to abolish the TSA and make sure that they're out of Texas. I don't feel safe whenever I'm going through airports because of a lot of issues that I've heard and seen online with people who've run into people who work with TSA and who have really overstepped their boundaries and have caused a lot of problems with having to strip search children or people who have disabilities or things like that. And I think that's become very problematic because that's not something that you say, oh, I think of America, I think of people strip searching others at the airports. And then our 10th Amendment, right? Really as a state, we need to stand up and say, if the federal government isn't allowed to do something, they shouldn't be coming into the state and telling us what we can or cannot do. That's the purpose of having so many, states is that, we can basically move and vote with our feet. If we don't like how one state's doing something, we can go somewhere else, or we can stand up in the state and fight, right? That's obviously what I choose to do because I love Texas. So.
Thank you.
Okay, this next one is on state sovereignty. Please tell us what entity grants us our unalienable rights, and why is it important to Americans? You have 2 minutes.
I think what grants us our right is natural rights, is that, being born as humans, we are lucky enough to have cognitive abilities and to be able to basically communicate with each other verbally and with, spoken language. And, I think as natural rights, we, I'm not sure what else to say other than, as long as you are, within your person and you're doing something that you would like to do, everything should be fine as long as you're not stepping on anybody else's natural right as well. So their ability to kind of live their life as they want and as they see fit, just as long as you're not infringing on somebody else's natural rights as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, this is on limited government. What state bureaucracies should be reduced or eliminated, and why? You have 2 minutes.
I don't know if 2 minutes is enough for state bureaucracies. So I think there are a lot of state agencies and that aren't very necessary because a lot of it's consolidating power at the higher level, and it comes down to centralized planning even at the state level. So something, for instance, would be the State Board of Education, where you actually only have a few members of it, but they're actually deciding all of the material that's going into all of the school districts that teachers then have to teach at the local level. And so I think what we really need to do, for instance, in that state agency, is to return power to the local level, return power to the independent school districts, as well as the teachers who are actually teaching in the classrooms, who know their students best, who know what their community needs, what each student needs, as each student learns differently, instead of having something that's very centralized and saying, basically, here's the exam that you need to teach to. Your students need to pass this exam for your school to get funding. Also, we need to return power to the parents who are, obviously their children are the ones that are going into these types of institutions, and I think parents need to have a lot more say in what their students are learning and what their children are learning. So, for instance, that would be one. But, there's a lot of, it's interesting because I was actually looking a while ago at all of the state agencies that we have in Texas, and there's so many of them that some of them were really obscure. Like, we actually have an agency that was called like the Juneteenth something, and basically what that organization or that state-funded organization does is they promote, I think it's like one day of the month or something like that, they basically promote just one group. And I don't know specifically what it was, but I remember seeing it and saying, well, if they're promoting, support for this one group, what about all of these other groups that aren't being promoted? If the state's going to fund it, shouldn't they all be equally promoted? So then maybe that's something that we need to remove.
Good, thank you. Okay, this one's on limited government. Please explain why a group of people are required to obtain government permission from a police department in order to hold a mass gathering when the First Amendment clearly states that the Congress shall make no law prohibiting the right of the people to peaceably assemble. And you have 1 minute for this.
That is actually a wonderful question that I would then ask everybody else. I don't know why they need to do that. If I were just to guess, I would say maybe it's, in case people think that those who are protesting or who are gathering to address their grievances, they fear that group might get out of hand. And I don't think they need to, get a permit for petitioning or to protest, because exactly like you said, it's First Amendment right. So I think that is, it's a very good question, and I would ask that to everybody else as well.
Okay, thank you.
This one's also on limited government. The Fourth Amendment states, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. In today's world, what does secure in their effects relate to? And you have 2 minutes.
Secure in their effects this day and age. I would almost say people aren't secure in anything, particularly because a lot of our lives have gone digital, and with that, with issues like the NSA being able to wiretap anything, your telephone, read your emails, and the scary thing that I most recently read is where they're able to turn on your laptop camera without the indicator showing that it's turned on. Things like that. So, this day and age, I don't think we're safe and secure anywhere, even within our own homes. And that's actually a very scary thing to think about. And so, I definitely think that's another reason that, more people need to get involved, more people need to get involved with local government, with state government, and with national government, because, the more that we sit idly by and allow this to happen and not address it at any level, it means that we're basically saying it's okay for the government to do this. It's just another thing, another power that they're stepping in there, and that we're freely giving away and allowing them to do. And a lot of us realize that they shouldn't be doing something like that. But either we're just too lazy to do anything about it, or we're just too apathetic, or we almost think that our efforts are futile. And I can understand that, because I was actually one of those people, back in the day too. It's like, well, what can I as one person do? But if everybody's thinking that way, then think of as everybody together with that same thought, what can everybody then do, right? So, really we're not safe and secure in any of our effects.
Thank you.
The next question is on personal responsibilities. The Declaration of Independence states that all men are created equal and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. At what point does a person's inalienable right to life begin? You've got 1 minute.
Life, for me, begins at conception, and ends at natural death. And for people to be secure and to be able to be protected for their life, that's for me where it really begins. I don't think I need a minute for something like that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, this is also on personal responsibilities. Is medical care a right or a privilege? And please explain your answer, and you have 1 minute.
Sure. For me, I think medical care is a privilege. I think, say for instance, back in the day, like way, way back in the day, when we didn't have the type of medical care that we have now, it wasn't right. It wasn't something that everybody had access to. It wasn't something that everybody had, freely available to them. It's not something that they just were born and grew up into. And for me, that would be something that would be considered, a right. So I think now the problem is that, our medical technology and education has expanded so much that it almost does seem like a right. It's something that we all should be able to access. And for me, I think we do. We are all able to access it. The problem is the cost of it, right? So then that comes down to something different. I don't think that becomes a question of it, whether it's a right or not. I think that becomes a question of do you have the monetary access to it, or if medical care is affordable. So I think that's a different question.
Thank you. And this is your last question. This is under the rule of law. What principle will you use as a litmus test to stand on before you vote on any legislation? And you have 3 minutes.
Okay. For me, again, it comes down to my ideology of the proper role of government. So for me, again, government needs to be protecting every single individual's life, liberty, property, and pursuit of happiness. So for me, the litmus test would be, one of the questions would be, if I'm voting on a bill, is this bill going to expand government? If it is, no, I'm not voting for it. Is it something that's going to increase taxes on the people? And if it's something that's going to increase taxes, I'm going to vote no against it. For me, it's really about getting back to limited constitutional government and getting back to fiscal responsibility and anything that can really maximize and return power to the American people. So for me, it would kind of come down to those 3 aspects, right? So again, with the government thing, is it going to make government bigger? If it is, no. Is it going to increase taxes? Yes. If it is, I will vote no. And then for the last aspect, is it going to return power to the American people? If it's something that will, then yes, I will vote for that. So those are kind of my 3 areas.
Okay. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you all as well.